You are listening to the Global CTE podcast with your host, Sylvester Chisom.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Global CTE podcast. This is the place where it is our desire to wrap a blanket of goodwill around our career tech education community, where we highlight the best, the brightest, the innovators, the movers, and the shakers. Today is no different. I have my good friend, Sean Murphy, here from Walmart.org. Now, let me tell you about Sean. Sean is a director of opportunity at Walmart.org with a strong passion for skills-based hiring and credentials. Sean is playing an important role in uncovering what the future of work will look like as it relates to the talent ecosystem. His true career passion is positioning others to be successful through career pathways that align with industry demands. It is within this passion he is driven by a belief in a workforce system that enables lifelong learning through multiple learning pathways, the building of a skill language that cross all forms of learning and experience, and the development of the digital infrastructure required to curate the data. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So a little background for our listeners. Our good friend Noah from the Badge Summit, he's like, you have to talk to Sean. Sean is doing some incredible, innovative stuff with Walmart.org and credentials and really moving the talent ecosystem forward. So I'm excited to have this conversation. But before we go too far, Sean, like, how do you get to this place? What's your origin story here?
Yeah, it's so interesting as we think about everyone and the journeys they take, right? You and I have talked a little bit about it already previously, and how we get to the place we are, and for me, it's no different, right? I mean, I think I got into a dialogue the other day with somebody who said, what did you want to be when you grow up, right? It was this dialogue around that, and I thought back to, it was originally going to be a marine biologist, and then I was gonna go own like a kayak business and tour people around, and it's somewhere along the way I ended up early on in the world of politics and government, working for members of U.S. Senate and House, and also a governor out in Washington State, and had amazing experiences working for people, really trying to do my best in the positions I was in to help people along, and somehow ended up diving more into the world of work, into the public workforce system for 6 years, and through that ended up having an opportunity to finish my MBA and get that done, and somehow landed here at Walmart. It's been such an amazing ride since joining here. I mean, I'll just say that for those that ever are considering an opportunity in corporate America, I would say take a look over here, just because I'm really in a position to be a part of a dynamic team doing really exciting things, not only as we think about what the business does for our customers and associates, but what I'm able to really focus on externally, and all the things that you highlighted in my background.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. It is interesting to see the twists, the turns, and how one position or job or relationship ends up connecting you to your next opportunity. Speaking of opportunity, that's your role at Walmart.org, Director of Opportunity. So what's that look like? Can you share about a little of the work that you
and it's very much been part of an awesome team of folks here doing really great work, and we all kind of have some of our expertise, but we really do work collectively as a team. And as I say that, what are we up to? In 2015, Walmart really said we want to not only make some major investments internally for associates, but also really thinking about, from a societal structure, what can we do to be helpful, and initially made a very large commitment of $100 million over 5 years. We've exceeded that in all the work, but more importantly, what have we been up to? And the what have we been up to key part is really focused on the upward mobility of the adult workforce, really thinking about the fact that people gain skills and learn how to do things and gain experiences in lots of different ways, right? Only only about 35 or so percent, maybe 40% get a degree, and yet we call that traditional. And that's a great route for so many. That's a route I've taken and appreciate it so much. But as we know, people learn in lots of different ways that they can grow, and we want to ultimately enable a system that truly values that learning and really enables people to grow in their careers, and to be more aware of high demand opportunities, and to really be understanding of the needs for lifelong learning. And so all of that really plays into this whole effort that we've been underway for now since 2015, and in really trying to help the ecosystem be better positioned to support the worker and meet the needs of employers.
I really I love that. I love the fact that it's yes, it's good for Walmart, but it's good for the community.
Mhm.
It's good for the entire workforce. Trying to push that agenda, that work forward. Talk to me as you were talking about the adult workforce, the data part. I know that's important to you.
Mhm.
Let's move the conversation a little to the 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 LERs, right? The
Yeah.
learning and employment records. I guess foundationally, before you go off on the innovative side, can you just share what is an LER? So for someone who's not familiar with that.
Yeah, there's a number of definitions out there that folks use. I think when I think of the topic of LERs, I think of it as a digital record of your learning, employment, and service. Right? It's something that allows you to share in a machine readable format, that it's interoperable and move across or between platforms and across borders, that can provide a deeper, richer sense of what you have done, all the way down to a skill level, but up to a degree level as well, or beyond that, right? Just giving a much clearer picture. And one of the things that we won't go too deep into this, but I think we live in this world, this future of work world, that is ever changing and looks different, and skills that are required today are different tomorrow. And so we're really required to, constantly be learning, no matter what path we've taken. And yet we're still leveraging a paper resume that you might as well fax, right? That only goes so deep into what you know. And so, that's where when I think about a learning and employment record, it enables you to tell your story, to be the person that manages what your story is, but allows you to tell it much more completely, through a record that is much more holistic and comprehensive, on what you bring to the table.
Can you give? Thank you for sharing it. That was very clear in your approach there. Can you give an example of what an LER would look like for an individual? So like if we bring it down, like what would that
Yeah.
look like?
So, when I think of LERs, it could be either an individual record or it
Right.
could be a collection of records, right?
Okay.
And so, as an example, you mentioned Noah and his awesome work that he does out there at University of Colorado Boulder, and their awesome event they host every year. Is that really hyper focuses on the badge? A badge is a form of digital record, right? And
Right.
that could be everything from just a basic skill, to a micro credential, to maybe a full credential of a program, right? And underneath that includes a number of different sets of information. One of the things we advocate for the most is making sure there's skills embedded into that, right? A real understanding of skills, but it also might be, what did you actually do to be assessed in your knowledge of that body of work? It could be proof of how you completed a project, right? It's all of those things could be encompassed into that. So, badge is an example. Others talk about CLR,
Right.
verifiable credentials, right? There's lots of, we can get into all the geeking out on the digital side of it or the technology side, but that's high level.
Yeah, I think that's the part that I'm really excited and interested about, is that, like you said, there's a way to connect the skill to it, and maybe even some verifiable work, or some form of that, being able to do that. Where are you seeing people house this LER, this info? Like, where is it housed? How do I
Yeah.
keep it with me and share it? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So, at the highest level, kind of the basic level of the infrastructure of this system, I'd be remiss real quick if I didn't highlight the fact that there's a group of national leaders working together, national organizations working right now to build out a map of the ecosystem that'll be out on the 18th of September. That's available on the T3 Hub website, and you can have that sent to you on the 18th or go view it afterwards. And so there's some really exciting efforts there bringing it together. But to get into your specific question, at the highest levels, I think of the LER ecosystem as the issuing of a record. That could be an employer, that could be a training provider, that could be a military service branch or a volunteer organization. Then you have to manage that record. In some ways, an individual, I have to bring that collection of LERs together from lots of different places. And then I ultimately have to be able to find value in those records to be able to connect them to others, whether it be other technology platforms or employers, or again, training providers, or even in government services or other areas where you may be able to see value in that. And so to your question, that management, most often what people talk about is the idea that everyone will have a digital wallet, or some in the past have called it a backpack, or also some prefer like Profile or something like that, but really a place that you can manage your own records and be able to curate them in a way that you can then present them to those you deem best suited to share them with.
Sean, thank you for sharing that. Talk to me about the equity piece
Yeah.
and potential in bringing more talent into the workforce that may have been marginalized with LERs.
Yeah, such a great question, and so important as we think about this. And while I see this system in a way that it really will impact the entire system, the excitement for me really falls into that category of equity and bringing the skills out of those that maybe haven't had the same visibility for a laundry list of reasons. And so when I think about that from an equity lens, is that in today's world, you really are leveraging the pedigree of where you went to school, or the title of your last job, maybe your social network, that most often I remind folks are your friends, really at the end of the day, right? And who are best positioned to make you look good when they can, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but that's ultimately how our system is based off today. And so when I think about this equity question, and I think about that earlier comment I made about how many people actually get go a traditional route of getting a degree and then going to work for a job for 50 years. That's a whole different topic. Nobody does that anymore, but they do go off and get a degree and move on from there. Not everyone has access to that. Not everyone learns that way. So even if you have all the money in the world and all the time in the world, that might not be the best position for you to go learn in, right? And so if we're going to build a truly equitable talent ecosystem that also meets the needs of our economic systems, we need to build out and really traditionalize the idea of personalized pathways that truly value skills no matter where you've gained them, right? That recognizes we all have interests and aptitude and learn in different ways. And we also all have different life circumstances, right? The mother of three, who's a single mom, who's working two jobs, is probably not best positioned to be able to go back to school full time, but maybe could learn incrementally, or could get real value in the skills that she's gaining in those two jobs that she's doing, or oh, by the way, the ability to manage that, all of that, which she has going on in her life, that's value. And I want that in my work environment, right? I want to work with people that are willing to put all of that online to do that. And so how do we build those personal pathways? This is where it's that idea of you need a language and most often spoken to it about skills, but I think it's skills plus, right? It's other sets of data that ultimately becomes that language that allows you to look across the different ways we learn. But at the same time, by doing that, you exponentially grow the amount of data that you now as an individual will have to manage. And so how do you have an underlying ecosystem that really allows you to be able to manage and curate, as we were talking earlier, and doing that? And so I think what's so exciting about that is that really we could get to a place we value whatever you have learned and gained and give you visibility into the fact there's lots of different routes you can take that can change and flow depending on what your needs are at the given time. Depends on what your goals are, where you're trying to get to. It doesn't leave people behind because we tell everyone the only way to be successful is to get a degree. It's just wrong. And yet that's a great path for many. So that's where I think it's really exciting. Now, we also have to keep a real close eye on that as we think about this equity lens, we have to also make sure that if we're building a more technology supported type of system, that people have the digital skills and have the other types of skills needed to be able to access these kind of systems. Otherwise, you also run the risk of further leaving people behind instead of bringing them more in as we're trying to do in this work.
Yeah, I do see that as a potential. Every good solution also creates some additional problems that we need to think about, and that is definitely one that's been on my mind as well. But I do think the greater good of moving in this direction, connecting the learning with the skills with the work that people have done, and making it easy to share that information will make a deeper impact.
Yeah.
As you were talking, you got me to thinking, man. I could tell you're so fired up about this.
It's so exciting. So
what would you tell career tech education directors or teachers back at the high school level to prepare, like as we think about the skills approach, to prepare students for other post-secondary opportunities that are not connected necessarily to degrees, like moving in this LER skills first type of direction? I'm curious your thoughts on
yeah,
what
I
you're
mean,
seeing.
I think one of the things I do always like to remind folks when I start talking about this world, my expertise is not the K-12 system,
Right.
but at the same time, it's so important that the K-12 system is a part of this overall ecosystem because that's really the foundation, as we know, right? And so I think the way I'll answer this is a little bit to not only the K-12 folks that are providing like CTE training and other paths like that, but also your community college or your alternative learning models, right? That are really thinking about a lot of times high demand type of roles in their community, and often training more technical kinds of skills to get people ready for those kind of jobs. And so a few things that I would throw out to keep in mind. One is it's one thing to train people. How are you helping them to signal what they know? Right? So we can do all of the upskilling we want to do and that can start at the K-12 level, right? But if folks are not prepared to then be able to signal what they know to those that need to know what they know, then we're doing a disservice in a lot of ways, right? And I've said this on a number of occasions recently. We all have a great story to tell. We're not all good storytellers. And so that's where as folks kind of think about this ecosystem and think about this work is for them to sit back and be like, oh, LARs, that's for the tech people, or that's for these folks, or that's the wild, wild west, and we're not going to be engaged in that. then I simply ask those folks to answer the question, how are they going to help folks signal what they know to the right people? And that's where, when I think they answer that question, they begin to realize they need to be a part of this effort to really digitize their records, but not just simply give me a pretty badge with a logo on it that means something, but to also provide a deeper, richer set of data underneath that about what skills did I gain, how did I gain those, what are the experiences a part of that, right? To give that deeper, richer, and to be a part of the building this momentum of these type of records. So now all of a sudden, I, as the high school student or the CTE student at the high school community, whatever level, I now have a record that I can show and present to others. The other part of this that I would really highlight that I think is really important is just in my story. I didn't go into all the in-depths of my story, right? But at the end of the day, it's evolved, it's changed. And the things I thought I was going to do at 16 are very different today. I often ask a number of questions when I'm speaking. And one of them is, how many of you are doing today what you thought you would do when you went to school? Most people are in something different, right? They're doing something different. And while there might be some synergies there, it's often different. And so in that mindset, how do we help people also recognize the skills adjacency or the skill alignment on, I might be taking a electrician course at the high school, but I'm actually gaining these kind of skills that could help me be a plumber, or could help me be a manager at Walmart, or could be, how do we really think about what I'm learning could help me in lots of different ways? It's not just I'm now only learning electrician skills, which, by the way, are great skills to know.
You have me thinking about one of our partners, America Succeeds, and the
Like
conversation
critical skills.
around durable skills, and how when they ran this study of like 80 million job postings, and the big things that companies like Walmart or people are looking for: communication, collaboration, teamwork,
Mhm.
metacognition, like creativity, critical, all those things
Yeah.
that uh, we're having conversations now. Right? How do you track those? How do you get that into some version of the learning that
Yeah,
record?
I love it. It's actually a perfect segue into the other questions that I often ask
Uh-huh.
during the beginning of any sort of speech is, and I always ask folks to raise their hand and keep them up as long as the answer is yes. And the first question is, how many of you gained experience in a frontline role early on in your career? Most
Okay.
hands go up, right?
Hands up.
The
Yeah.
next question is, how many of you feel like you gain foundational skills for what you do today? Most
Yeah.
people's hands stay up.
Yeah.
Then I ask, how many of you have continued to keep that experience on your resume or speak to it when you're interviewing for the job today?
Hands down.
Most hands go down, right? And so I think you can talk about that in different lenses, right, from different experiences and that. But I see that so important about retail, and that's a lot of what we're thinking about here, right? Is that we've got a lot of frontline workers, and whether it's in the stores or you look at people that are working frontline in lots of different roles, they gain so many important, in this case, durable skills. Others call it 21st century skills. There's lots
Right.
of ways
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
talk about it, but we're not very good about speaking to those skills, and that goes back to that storytelling comment I made
Yeah.
earlier.
Okay, so I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I know some people, some companies still have pushback on, well, you need a degree to work here, but we're saying we're moving towards skill-based hiring.
Mhm.
I've also thought about or heard some conversation around maybe an easier entry point for even some companies is skills-based promotion. Like, if
Mhm.
we know Janet, who works, who's been here for 10 years. She's great. She's awesome, reliable. But this new position she would thrive in, but currently it requires a degree.
Hmm.
Like, should we give
Yeah.
her that opportunity, or should we take a person off,
Yeah.
just based on their resume who has the degree? Like,
Hmm. Yeah, it's such a great question, and there's really probably a few questions there, but I think one is you're seeing a large scale movement of companies, Walmart being one of them, that is taking a real close look at our roles and saying, do we require a degree to be able to do this role? And when it's not needed, removing that as a requirement. Now, I will say, degrees are still a great place to gain skills, but it should not be the requirement because guess what? To your point, you can gain skills in other ways. And so, you've seen a big movement around that. And now what you're seeing is this next leg of a whole lot of companies really thinking about, okay, then how do we evaluate your experience to determine what skills you have to be able to match you to those roles? So now that person you mentioned who doesn't have the degree can be considered for those roles because they can show they have gained the skills in another way, or have them close enough, and maybe I can be trained for the remaining pieces. And so, I think like any sort of large scale change management, most of the companies out there, especially the big companies, are thinking about a lot of the mechanisms for what that means to make that conversion, to make sure you're doing it in a way that doesn't build in new biases into the process, that truly allows you to evaluate skills no matter where they've been earned. And that's a journey that I think most employers are on, and are figuring it out, and you're seeing some good practices. I think the other part of what you brought in there is this idea of what's the upward mobility? That's a lot of what we think about is the upward mobility. And I can tell you from the Walmarts to the business side, they're doing a lot of that thinking, right? We're doing a lot of investments. One of my favorite new programs we launched, I guess it was earlier this year, is our associate to driver program. In your first year as a driver, you could be making $110,000. And in that program, they're pulling folks from the stores and the distribution warehouses and in the field into this program that's a hybrid program where you're learning the basic skills necessary for that, but then also gaining the hands-on experience and working with other drivers to be positioned and then being put into a role that is not only in high demand but pays well and allows you to move from there, right? And so I think what we have to think about from a mobility standpoint, if we want really good, successful pathway development internal, and not just through new hires, it's got to be a real understanding of what skills do we have that we can leverage and grow from. I think about Walmart. 75% of our managers come from entry level roles in our stores, right?
wow.
75%, right? So we've been doing that for a long time, and that's where, as a company, it's thinking about how do you even do that more deliberately, hence the program I just mentioned, right? So there's ways to upskill people to get them ready for those roles, but then there's this other piece of there's a whole lot of skills folks have, and how do we match those to the roles that to the right role at the right time, and that's where there's still a lot of ongoing work happening. But the digitizing of records and enabling machine readability of records that are happening not only before you come here, while you're here, and internal to while you're here, right? Because a lot of people learn externally from the job they have. How do you bring all that together to help somebody's momentum as they grow?
Yeah, hats off to you all for thinking about that and keeping that at the forefront of moving people forward in life. That's awesome. You're making me think about an article I read about the work that's happening in Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
and and uh the Alabama talent triad, and
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's thought of to be the nation's first talent marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me about that work? I know you're familiar with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, no, familiar with it. We've also helped support some of the programming that's been developed. It's very exciting work, and I think it's funny when when they announced the official launch the other day. I said, this is awesome. You guys, it's time for you to celebrate. Now it's time to show results, right? And I'm really confident they're going to be able to show those results because they're thinking about the work comprehensively. They're thinking about and enabling the digitization of the records at a skill level, really thinking about competencies as well within that, being able to enable those in Alabama to be able to store those in their own wallet and have accessibility to their records. And then, where we're at today from then connection with employers is that really you need that kind of job board. I think most of the folks would not love that term that are in that space, but that place where you can be able to then connect your skills to the employment opportunities and to make those connection with employers and improve the type of candidates you're bringing more diverse candidates because you're really doing it from a skills-based level versus a proxy level like a degree or other requirement that may not give full value for all the skills you've gained. And so it's really exciting to see that full system come together. You're seeing other states that are really either close to what they're doing or at least have projects going on that have similarities. In Indiana, you've seen some really good work with their Indiana Achievement Wallet. WGU is a big stakeholder and partner in that. You're seeing some really good work and development in North Dakota and the work they're doing there. There's a big K-12 focus on that piece that's pretty exciting. You're seeing some work in Dallas and Colorado and Arkansas. So you're seeing some really good work happening other places. But I think what Alabama has done is really bring it all together into a holistic approach and launch it collectively while thinking about the fact that they need to be interoperable with other systems and allow individuals to move their records as they need to.
So yes, hats off to everyone in Alabama moving that work forward and for you all supporting that work. For someone who's listening at the state level, what would you recommend as a starting point for them to maybe model some of that behavior that Alabama is moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I would say that's been successful about the Alabama work and allowed it to really move forward is that, Governor Ivey, Nick Miller, who leads their work, or I'm sorry, Nick Moore, who leads their work there at a workforce level in the governor's office. There's really been a clear vision from the beginning. And I think developing a clear kind of what's the why, what's the vision is important. I think then it's the creating the buy-in across stakeholders, right? Really bringing all of the stakeholders to the table, not only from an agency level, but from an educational provider level, especially if it's a state level type of body of work, thinking about the public institutions, but also not leaving behind the non-public institutions who want to be a part of it. And also, I think the last piece that's been so important about what the governor's office and the project partners have done there in Alabama is they've been bringing the employers along with them and really making sure that what they're building and what they're trying to design for is going to meet their needs as well, and not doing the build it and they will come kind of mantra that sometimes is out there in projects, whether at the government level or at a vendor level, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful, and I hope we see more states picking up on that. But the biggest thing I'm hearing you're saying collaboration.
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
have to get on the same page and speak the same language.
Yeah, and that's where it's so important. I've thrown the word interoperable in here a couple times. If folks, I said this a while back in an event where maybe I've said it a couple times now, is that this skills movement is happening. We can either build a system that really interconnects and interweaves all of these different tools and platforms to enable folks to see real momentum in their life and to meet the needs of our economy, or we could just end up with a bunch of cool tools that some people have access to. And that's where when I say interoperable, it's really about this fact that if we're going to be successful, it's because that person in Alabama who lives there today, who's going to move to Arkansas tomorrow or whatever that might look like, can take their data with them, right? That can move that data to other tools and platforms, and really have use to that. Or that person in Alabama who goes to school maybe online at WGU or at ASU or any one of the amazing schools out there in the world, and can be able to bring that data back into their state and maximize their ability to lead the work long term for their own personal journey.
Yeah, I feel like you're reading my notes. My next question was to push on that interoperable component and the work how the T3 network, how that the T3 Innovation Network,
Yeah.
what's talk to me about that digital transformation, like the work that's happening in that collaborative group. I know you Walmart.org supports that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, T3 has been so important. They've been around, of course, they're coming out of the U.S. Chamber Foundation, and are really a collaborative of partners across this ecosystem, and have been coming together for a number of years to really think about use cases and think about data standards and all of these kind of technical terms that we get into, right? To build up what this ecosystem's gonna be. That work has been so important. You've also seen some really great work coming out of MIT's Media Lab with the Digital Credentials Consortium and Credential Engine and their registry, and competency-based education network that's really worked to define interoperability, and the National Governors Association. There's so many JFF. There's just so many partners that have been working to really collaborate. And so, one of the things that's coming together, and I mentioned earlier with the ecosystem map that's coming together, is, well, there's been so much great work in all these organizations, and at the end of the day, it's really been coming together in ways that couldn't even imagined a couple of years ago. But what a group of folks came together on this ecosystem map, including the T3 community, is to say, let's really clearly define the why, and let's build the map. Let's build this map from a high level, right? At least a high level map of who are the stakeholders, how are they engaged, what does this ecosystem look like, and bring together these national stakeholder groups to really create buy-in to that map, and then put it out there in the world and say, what do you think? Where do we need to make adjustments? How do we improve on this map? What does that look like? But also then get to a place that the individual stakeholder groups, the ACRO of the world, who represents the registrar's offices for all the universities, what do they need to do to work together as an association, as individual universities, to make sure they're a part of what this map looks like when it's demonstrated and when it's scaled, right? So they can work on that and really drill into those things. And so that work has been underway for the last, I'd say, 9 months or so. They're going to bring out the version 1 as it's being talked about, coming up on the 18th. And then, you're then seeing a collection of funders come together to put together an RFP later this year, funded collectively, but ultimately going through the Rockefeller Philanthropic Advisors team to demonstrate this work. And so that's where we really see over the next couple of years that you can take all of those early efforts of T3 and others and bring them together into a clear map, demonstrate that map, and continue to inform what needs to be updated, but demonstrate end-to-end kind of programming, and then to be able to have the researchers and others that can evaluate that and really figure out where are the holes, what do we need to do in order to really have a system that's kind of that hockey stick, right? That slow growth, and then just exponentially goes straight up from a scalability standpoint, especially as we get beyond 24 into 25 and for sure into 26.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be transformational. I feel like in really fixing the the data layer that underlies the labor market,
Yeah.
and help us all speak the same language and understand it.
Yeah,
Sure.
100%. And I think when you say that, what I get thinking about, from my time in the public workforce system and even today, if we're truly going to meet the opportunity that's in front of us for the opportunity or for the future of work and all of it comes to it in a future economy, we truly, as I've said before, we have to be data driven. And a lot of the data sets we have today are not good in the rural communities because often the sample sizes are too small. We're atrocious at understanding at the individual level. There's a lot of assumptions added into the data at the individual level. And so if we're truly going to empower this system and build something that not only helps and drives the individual, that meets the needs of the employers, and ultimately is then promoted at a community level, we've got to fix this underlying data infrastructure to really empower building a data-driven system, just like you've seen with so many other industries.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Sean, for for all your sharing here today.
Okay.
Normally I like to start with the why, but I think for my last question, I'm just curious, like what's the why behind all of this conversation, this paradigm shift of LERs and T3, like all of it? I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about some of the why throughout this dialogue, which, by the way, just really appreciate the dialogue and the opportunity to just share with your audience, not only what Walmart's up to, but what all these partners are up to externally. Um, but when I think about this effort and I think about the why and I think about the narrative change that's required, right? You cannot jump to LERs with most people without putting them to sleep. And you can even have trouble jumping to skills like, oh, that's just a fad that is launching right now. It'll go away in time, right? And to all those folks, what I say is, I get it. I get that there's been lots of different kind of ideas and things in the past, but we are on this road to building a skills-based system. It's gonna happen. It's just a matter of, do we do it in a way that truly enables the success of individuals from all different types of backgrounds and learning styles and experiences. Do we do it in that way, or do we do it something else? And so as I think about this narrative change need that ultimately allows us to define the why, you have a lot of people talking about skills. You have a lot of people talking about LERs. You have a lot of people talking about upskilling and the skill gaps and all of these sort of things. And when I think about those things and many others, I actually think about it as a Venn diagram, right? That with the word data in the middle, that a lot of this is more than any one of us can handle individually. But with the power of data and the use of AI as a supporting mechanism, here at Walmart, we talk a lot about being people-led and tech-powered, right? We're always going to have that face of the individual out in front, but how can they be supported through technology? But with all of that being said, all of this kind of idea of changing the narrative and really thinking about this holistically and getting to a place that every stakeholder can see what their role is in this future system, we have to keep at the center of all of this the individual. And whether you are the single mother of three I mentioned earlier, who is trying to provide for her children, and also meet her own personal interests and goals in life, or you're the professional who's been in the same job as an accountant for 20 years. Lifelong learning is a reality of our world today. And we have to value that, and we have to appreciate that, and we have to change our thinking around that. And we also have to drive value behind that. Just learning for learning's sake is amazing. We all do it. We all read books. We all do things that drive our learning. It's part of who we are as humans. But we also understand that if we can have value for that learning, that all of a sudden your necessity to want to do it changes, right? And so how do you really set up that system? How do you truly empower that individual to recognize the need for lifelong learning, to see value for wherever it comes from, and to meet the needs of our economy in a way that allows us to continue moving forward as a strong country we have been. But you could also think about it globally as well. So how do you do those things? And I think if we can truly drive the why, which I've kind of given the roundabout answer, but really done it throughout today, and really enable us to think about this as a system and not just a bunch of disparate parts. And everyone can recognize what their role is, not be overwhelmed by the entirety of the ecosystem, but thinking about what their role is in this, that you can truly change the trajectory of so many folks as it moves forward.
Outstanding. Great answer. I really enjoyed this podcast today. I know I've learned a ton. I'm sure our listeners have learned so much about the future of work and education and how it's all connected here. If someone wants to connect with you or one of the organizations that you all support, where would you like to direct them?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best place. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there, so at the very least, I'm often posting things about reports or announcements or those sort of things coming together. So follow me there. Feel free to reach out. Not able to connect with everybody, but
Right.
always do appreciate connecting with folks. So I'd say that's probably the best place to keep an eye on and follow up.
Right. Outstanding. If you enjoyed this episode, don't be selfish. Share it with a friend. A lot of great knowledge was shared here today. And until the next episode, remember, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great.
Thank you for listening to the Global CTE podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes.